Well, welcome everyone. I'm Bill Hannafin, your host for today's webinar, Powering Lifetime Connections, Pathways to Creating Meaningful Brand Relationships. Today's webinar will be presented by a group of seasoned executives in leadership positions with Epsilon, Alliance Data Card Services, and LoyaltyOne. And our agenda is going to cover three distinct areas of content. Shannon Andrick is going to speak about the rules of next-gen loyalty. Tad Fordyce will add his perspectives on building emotional loyalty through customer experience. And then Caroline Papadopoulos is going to help us wrap things up, bringing her global loyalty perspective to this customer-centric business. So we'll have that little bit of wrap up. We'll do some Q&A at the end, and we should have a great session here. So just a few quick housekeeping notes as we get started. We've muted each one of you, all of our registered participants today, just to manage the background noise, but it's really important that we have all of you involved in this conversation. That's how we look at it, as something that we're all in together. And so we'd ask that each of you, if you have questions, please post them in the chat box that's visible on your screen. We have a moderator working in the background who's going to keep an eye on that stream, raise the questions up. If there's something really pressing during the course of the material, we'll ask that question. Otherwise, we're going to save them up for the end for the Q&A. And we're really committed to make sure that everybody feels well served in the next hour. So we invite you to send any questions or any thoughts or comments that you have after the webinar that you felt like maybe were burning or just didn't get addressed. Send them to contact, C-O-N-T-A-C-T, at thewisemarketer.com, and we'll return a response promptly after the event today. A quick word about your host today, which would be us. The Wise Marketer Group publishes thewisemarketer.com, widely known as the global resource for loyalty marketers. We also operate the Loyalty Academy, which is the only source of professional education in our industry, and the one place where you can earn the designation of Certified Loyalty Marketing Professional. As a side note, our annual CLMP certification workshop is coming up in Fort Lauderdale, October 16 through 19. The Wise Marketer also publishes the Loyalty Guide and is a sponsor of the Loyalty Academy Thought Leadership Conference, scheduled to be held next at Pier 66 Resort and Marina in Fort Lauderdale on March 6, 2019. But enough about us. We're really very fortunate and pleased to have a stellar group of presenters. I'd like to introduce each one and then just jump into this material. I'm fortunate to know many of these folks, and Tad Fordyce is a longtime veteran of this industry in payments and loyalty both. He's Senior Vice President of Loyalty at Epsilon. He's responsible for leading Epsilon's loyalty business, including the Agility Loyalty Solution. Prior to joining Epsilon in January 2016, Tad served as Senior VP Global Commercial Solutions at Visa, where he was responsible for Visa's B2B payment products around the world. Additionally, he was responsible for business strategy and product management of Visa's risk, loyalty, and business intelligence solutions. And before joining Visa, Tad was the Director of Database Marketing for Hilton Hotels, and he holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Communications from Southern Methodist University. Shannon Andrick is Vice President of Marketing Advancement at Alliance Data. Shannon is a strategy and marketing executive in the retail and financial services industries. Her teams deliver Alliance Data's Know More, Sell More promise to brand partners through consultative engagements. And she's always keeping a sharp eye out for program evolution to ensure best-in-class program and execution. Shannon conveys Alliance Data's competitive advantage via thought leadership, conferences, and digital properties to the broader market. Prior to joining Alliance Data, Shannon spent 18 years in retail merchandising, successfully driving sales and category growth for Bath & Body Works and Target Corporation. And Caroline Papadopoulos, she is Senior VP of LoyaltyOne Global Solutions. Caroline sits on the executive committee and leads global alliances and key loyalty partnerships in North America and abroad. This includes the loyalty consulting practice, which consults with global brands and programs, including Latin America's leading coalition program, DOTS. Caroline also leads LoyaltyOne corporate marketing and thought leadership, and her extensive practitioner experience in loyalty, customer centricity, and brand management brings a lot of wisdom and insight to all of her clients. She's a successful B2C and B2B change agent and has a proven track record in designing and managing loyalty coalitions and delivering innovative customer loyalty and retention strategies to drive superior customer financial performance. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Shannon, who's going to cover our first bit of content, and we'll transition from there. So Shannon, welcome.
Thank you so much, Bill. I'm so excited to be here today and to be able to share with all of you a little bit about all of the different lines of businesses that are a part of Alliance Data. So when you think about Epsilon, we refer to ourselves as Card Services, and LoyaltyOne. We all drive loyalty and just do it in different ways, but really with the brand and the consumer at the heart of all of that, and have the opportunity to work with hundreds of some of the world's most recognized brands, and really keep a close eye on what's happening in this market. So thank you for having us. As we kind of jump into the content today, we have conducted a study here at Card Services last year, and I'm just going to share a little bit about that. One of the things that we do here is we have about 150 branded credit card programs, and within that about 45 million active cardholders. And so when you think about scale, about 1 in 3 American women have one of our cards in their wallet. And as we think about the consumer being the heart of all that we do, we wanted to dig in and understand what was happening with the youngest consumers. We know that has been a point of interest in the market, and it was really piggybacking off of a study we had done the year prior around just general sentiment in the market around loyalty, but we were fascinated by what we were seeing with millennials. So this time we dug in and wanted to understand both what was happening with millennials, but also with the most up and coming generation of Gen Z. And when you take a look at how those customer segments or consumer segments are grouped, we really felt that it would be important to understand the differences even within the millennial segment because of where they are in their life stage. So Gen Z, obviously 8 to 20, we're thinking more about the older end of that group that are starting to, go to college and start trade schools, really starting to experience maybe their first opportunity of any sort of financial independence. Sometimes that can't come quick enough in my own house, wanting them to get there. And then when we talk about millennials and we think about those two groups, we split them into two sections, sort of young millennials and older millennials, because where they are in their life stage is just so different. Young millennials, kind of that 21 to 28, are starting to experience their first major life events. They're starting to get engaged or married, purchasing cars, and beginning careers and families. And then when we looked at older millennials, kind of that 29 to 36, they have moved beyond kind of those first eventing adulthood events in their life. So many of them have started families, they're purchasing a first or even a second home at this point, and are pretty well established in their careers, and perhaps even have expanded into 2 or 3 different major jobs at this point. So felt it was we would really not be serving well if we just lumped them all together. And I think that's part of the problem is, as a marketer, it's like, how do you ensure that you're not lumping them all together? And so this study was conducted in the US. I saw the question pop up down there. And we did both a qualitative and a quantitative study. So we did some app tracking, mobile diaries, Skype interviews, really got into kind of the psyche of those consumers. And then we also followed that up with a survey so that we would have the statistical information that we needed. A couple of things as we think about this generation that we thought were interesting. It did some myth busting, as we would refer to it. So you kind of get this vibe that millennials aren't always responsible and maybe not as focused on meeting deadlines. And we really found that that wasn't the case. They weren't as casual as perhaps they have been, considered. 79% of them felt it was important to be on time. They're not as impulsive as perhaps folks think. 60% of them are educating themselves versus making an impulsive decision. And that got us thinking, when we're looking at that psyche of the customer, Why is that? And part of this is they have so much access to information every day through, the phone in their hand or their tablet or online, that they don't have to do things that are impulsive because they just have a vastly different ability to access things that we didn't have necessarily even 10, 15 years ago. So that was just sort of setting up a little bit about who they are and what the study was about. I was going to share. So if we go to the next slide, one of the things that came out of this is we established what we call the 4 rules of next gen loyalty. And the first one of those rules is around loyalty is earned. So because of the amount of choice that consumers have available today, and they have this instant access and they're empowered, it puts them in control when it comes to that brand relationship. And one of the things that I always found to be interesting, when I spent so many years in retail, we would talk a lot about driving loyalty. And it's really very different now. You're not driving anything. You have to earn that loyalty, and you have to really understand where the consumer is, what's important to them, and get them to be loyal to you because of what you are bringing forward and the benefits that you're offering to them. And so when you think about all the channels that they have available, the options that they have, this choice is something that has become very important in terms of our journey with consumers. And then when you think about the rate of change that they've experienced, this generation is really the first digitally native generation, but the change that is happening in the evolution and innovation in all technologies, not just in digital, are something that have really changed rapidly right before their eyes. And so it feels like a lot of change to us, but for them, it's come a little bit more just common, and that's what their expectations are on a daily basis. And so one of the things we wanted to understand is when you're thinking about loyalty to a brand, what are the things that are most important to you? And so getting the basics right, we found, was really critically important. So as we go to the next slide, you'll see across all of those generational breakouts, there were table stakes around price and quality, very high across all groups. And I think that's something that we would expect, and also something that brands can really rally around in terms of, if I'm trying to reach a broader audience, what are the things I just need to get right? And those are some of those table stakes and fundamentals. Some of the other key factors that come into play are selection, convenience, location, and those are things that are a little bit more common. And so it's great to say, okay, we have some table stakes that we can sort of build this foundation of loyalty on, and we'll have to dig a little bit deeper to understand what the nuances are with this generation and how I reach them. So one of the things that we saw is 63% of younger consumers agreed that they had lots of choices of where to shop. And so it was important for a brand to show them loyalty to earn their business. So talk about turning the tables from how loyalty has been viewed in the past. So for us, really, it was about consumers being loyal to brands because brands are loyal to them. They know that they're in control, and they just expect that loyalty from a brand. They expect to be able to count on the brand for very specific things. And that kind of is how we've encapsulated loyalty being earned. The second rule that we've identified is that, if we flip to the next slide, sorry, and then the next one, I'm talking faster than the slides here. But the second rule is around loyalty being complex. So really people want simplification, but actually it is a very complicated world, and customers are evolving and their expectations have evolved. And so one of the things that we've seen is you have to rethink the approach to loyalty. It's hard to just have like a one-dimensional statement of this is my loyalty program, or this is how I'm going to drive loyalty within my customer base, because the customers feel differently. So we wanted to understand a little bit about what's important to them when they even think about loyalty. So we asked these consumers, what were words that come to mind when you think about loyalty in life? And there were things that bubbled up that you would naturally expect around the who in that. So family, friends, love. But there were also things that bubbled up that really also showed up when we asked them to think about loyalty to brands. Things like honesty, trust, and quality. So we thought that was very interesting to see that the things that were important to them for loyalty in life were some of the same things that resonated and showed up when they thought about loyalty to brands. So that led us to creating this next gen loyalty continuum. And one of the things as we think about that is loyalty really resides on this spectrum. So while we have kind of fundamentally these things around trust, honesty, and reliability, there's also this notion of functional loyalty all the way to emotional loyalty. And that really was resonant with us when we started talking to them a little bit more deeply, even in some of the interviews around what does that mean to you? And so we asked them about what are brands that they love and shop frequently, what are brands that they love but rarely shop, or brands that they shop and don't love. And it all came down to that, price quality relationship, which obviously we know is value. And it was very interesting to think about, when you think about a brand I love and I shop frequently, it meets the standards on both sides. I'm comfortable with the amount I'm spending with you, and what you're selling me meets my expectations. And so some of the brands that rose top of mind when we asked them to name those brands were things like Nike, Victoria's Secret. We also talked about what are brands that you love but you rarely shop. And that's where it started to get a little bit more on the emotional side of that next gen loyalty continuum. The amount might be a little higher than the customer's personal comfort zone, but they're willing to spend that amount when they have the opportunity or are able to. And some of the brands that really rose to the top there were brands like Michael Kors, Gucci, even Nordstrom, which is very aspirational for many consumers. But there was also this bucket of brands that the customers talked a lot about, that I shop them, but I do not love them. So I'm shopping them because they're meeting those very functional needs. It's price driven. It might be a convenience for me. It's close to my home, but really I'm compromising a bit on the quality because of the value that I'm extracting from that relationship. So it makes us think a little bit differently about what are the different things from a loyalty perspective that you need to consider as a brand, and where do you want to really place your efforts. So that led us to the next role. And that's really that loyalty is fragile. So with all of the choice that they have available, it's one thing for them to become loyal to your brand, but what we really kind of have seen is that breaking up with you is easy and winning them back is hard. Younger consumers, they want and expect great service and an ideal experience. And that's not just when they're in your store, but across all the channels. And because they have so many choices, they really just don't have to put up with any less than that. In the study, we saw that 76% of consumers, if you flip to the next slide, only give brands 2, maybe 3 chances before they stop shopping them. And what we thought was really interesting here is if you think about that, because of the frictionless way that a customer is engaging with brands today, when you think about the online, in-store, on my phone, social, that negative experience could have happened online. Perhaps they were shopping and they found something they loved, they went to put it in their basket, and you didn't have their size. So they're already a little bit annoyed with you, but you don't know that, right? You may not realize that. So then they come into the store, they find something, they come to check out, and you don't accept the coupon they have because it's expired, or there's an item that is an exclusion. So it's really taking all of the data that you have access to, connecting that data to have a better view of what the customer's journey has been with you, so that you can avoid and mitigate those negative interactions to build that loyalty. 1 in 3 consumers, I thought this was kind of a scary fact if I think about when I was at brands, 1 in 3 saying nothing could be done when asked what a brand could do to win them back. I don't know about you guys, but I know when I was in retail, there's no way I could afford to lose, a third of my consumer base. So thinking about the fragility of loyalty and what's going on makes me pause and think about what are the pain points that I need to recognize with consumers, and how do I mitigate those pain points early on. So we asked them, what are the top reasons that you stopped shopping a brand or engaging with a brand? It was very interesting because the same reasons that they stopped shopping a brand are the same reasons that they start shopping a brand. So it's just the converse of that. So high prices, poor quality, etc. Also see that social media is something that amplifies customer out there. So brands have to be careful about that. You can see how they're influenced kind of by generation, but also the fact that when they're not happy, they can certainly take the social channels and voice their dissatisfaction. So you want to ensure that you're answering from a social media perspective right away and answering those complaints if they're out there, engaging with them, responding to them, and then promoting the things that your brand really stands for. Which really leads us to, if you flip the slide to the last role. So for us, loyalty is really multifaceted. It's this functional, emotional, and everything in between. And so one of the things that we looked at when we thought about the next gen loyalty continuum, and we overlaid the brands that they love, shop frequently, love, don't shop frequently, love but rarely shop, are the why. What is within there? And you can really see in the next slide how different attributes start to matter in different ways. And so as a brand, you have to decide. You can't be everything to everybody. So if you're a brand that is more about convenience and discounts, it's okay to be in that functional loyalty part of the continuum. That may be the heart of who you are as a brand. It's also okay to be on the emotional end of that spectrum. But I think it's really knowing your customer and deciding what is the relationship you're wanting to build with your customer base on a one-to-one basis. One of the things we looked at, and if you kind of go to the next slide there, is around what is the difference between traditional brand loyalty and brand love loyalty. So traditional loyalty, and the way that I looked at it for years, it's functional, can be emotional, but you're really serving a need and for a better experience for your customer. But we looked at that and gauged that and measured it through traditional RFM models, lifetime value, things like that. And as we thought about brand love loyalty, it's built on that foundation of function, but it's rooted in more emotional elements beyond transaction and really around aspirations. So there's a need for these more multidimensional metrics outside of the transaction. How do you measure affinity? How do you measure aspiration? We've been partnering with Express, and one of the things that they're measuring is non-purchase engagement. So providing points for people posting on social, and they've never made a purchase in store. So are you building a future generation of customers that will love you? And perhaps they just haven't started shopping with you yet, but you are influencing them. And so as we sort of wrap it up, and then I'll hand it over to Tad to talk a little bit more about how we build that emotional loyalty. We really think about, as a brand, you may be in that traditional brand loyalty space today. You may aspire to brand love loyalty. And if you don't achieve that brand love loyalty with every customer, it's okay. But these are 4 rules that we think you can take back and apply to your own brands to really just deepen that relationship with those younger consumers. And I'm going to hand it over to Tad to talk a little bit more about how Epsilon is viewing emotional loyalty and what brands can do.
Thanks, Shannon, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Yeah, I thought I'd maybe just build on some of the comments that Shannon made and talked about how the industry is moving away from transactional loyalty and really focusing on emotional loyalty and gaining that emotional engagement. I'm going to share some strategies with you that we're seeing as pretty predominant amongst the brands we work with. If you go to the next slide, again, the intent is to create that emotional connection. And if you go on from here, we'd like to start with some conversation about personalization as the first strategy. Share some statistics with you. There's real reason to focus on personalization. 82% of consumers that have high emotional engagement would always buy the brand they're loyal to. And that is even if the price points are different. 83% of consumers really expect this reciprocal type of engagement with customers or with the brands that they're doing business with. 70% of consumers with high emotional engagement are going to spend twice as much. So there's a real return on this. And I'll show you some statistics later about how the strategies can be justified. 5% annual revenue boost can be achieved due to strong emotional engagement with consumers. So it's definitely a strategy worth pursuing. If you move to the next slide, the question becomes, how do you really achieve that? And as I said, the first step is going to be through personalization. And really engaging customers through experiences is a real focus of folks today. So we'll talk about a couple of ways that kind of comes to life. Some more statistics around personalization and why to focus on this. 80% of the consumers are more likely to do business with a company that feels like they're personalizing experiences. 40% of consumers say that they will likely repeat shopping after a personalized experience. And consumers who believe that companies are really doing this well are going to shop 3 times more frequently. So consumers who believe this personalized experience are very appealing are 10 times more likely to be a brand's most valuable customer. So clearly focusing on the personalization helps. But what we note is that it's really not just personalization, it's about being personal. So if you go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And I'm going to talk quite a bit about millennials kind of as building on what Shannon out of the research.
Sounds like we might have lost Ted just a little bit.
Points around this. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sound much better now.
Sorry about that. Had a little breakup. Anyway, I was saying millennials are commonly interacting with brands on social media as well, and doing so more than previous generations. So if you go to the next slide. Talk a little bit about personalization is the new loyalty. And I love this quote from Jeff Rosenfeld at Neiman Marcus. It really speaks to the fact that personalization now is really a core element of any loyalty program. And there are some proof points. Again, looking at millennials across a variety of different verticals, we found that 85% of millennials that are in the restaurant purchase category really expect that kind of personalization. We found that half of millennials are using a loyalty program, stopped using a loyalty program after getting irrelevant messaging. Almost 80% of millennials said that they would pay for rewards if they were tailored to meet their needs. And roughly 2/3 of millennials appreciate having staff at the brands actually being armed with personalized information, make that interaction more relevant. The second big trend is around experiential rewards. And this is really the focus of most of the loyalty programs we're working with now. Bonus promotions are giving way to exclusive experiences, things like auctions. New tiers are being launched on top of traditional base programs where as part of that new tier, you get access to new experiences that are unique. Experiences can be a means to earning points as well. As Shannon called out, we're working with a number of customers who are rewarding members in their program for activities beyond just a purchase. And so unfortunately, not all programs have really endorsed this, and about 44% of shoppers think that the reward that they're getting is sometimes irrelevant. So there's, as an industry, a lot of additional work we can do to engage customers in these experiences. If you go to the next slide there. The whole goal of this is to really elevate the customer's experience and create that relevancy. And as I said earlier, we did a survey across a number of different verticals. This is certainly true with millennials in terms of having a good experience in the restaurant industry. If you have the ability to meet with a chef or a nutritionist, it makes those consumers more loyal to the brand. In the retail space, having a consultative engagement with a stylist certainly is resonating with customers. If you look in the technology space or software, 3/4 of the respondents said that, interacting with someone in store will absolutely encourage brand loyalty. And again, more than 2/3 of millennials said that in the beauty space, if they had an opportunity to meet with a makeup artist and really get that personal experience, that they're going to be more loyal to that brand as well. So the third strategy that I'd put forward is this notion of gamification. This is really a proven way to engage customers because humans by nature are competitive. And there are a few brands out there that are doing this really well, but and it can be an effective engagement method that doesn't cost a lot of money. So we've got a number of partners right now, clients who are using gamification as a way to engage customers across a variety of different touch points. And it can be used to not only engage consumers, but other constituents in the loyalty program. So it could be employees and giving them incentives to enroll or engage customers, or even franchise owners and creating what we like to say is, competition amongst the franchisees who, want to make sure that they're, getting the best out of the rewards programs themselves. If we go to the next slide, gamification really motivates a target audience. And this is a great quote from Gartner: to higher and more meaningful levels of engagements, because humans are hardwired to enjoy games and have this natural tendency to interact more deeply in activities that are framed in a game construct. More and more often, this is a mobile experience. And we see that this is just beginning to take foot in the loyalty industry. Some of the data points on the right-hand side: 14% participation in gamification programs, in loyalty programs. So pretty early days in that context. But more than 1/4 of millennials reported that they would stay in a loyalty program because it had this competitive aspect to it. So leaderboards, badges are a great way to reward customers for activities, whether it's posting online, watching a video. There are a number of ways that they can interact with the brand and earn some sort of loyalty currency in exchange for that engagement. So if we put this all together, there are a few brands out there that we look at that are doing this really well. No surprise, I think to most of you, Starbucks is often held up as one of the best loyalty programs out there. It's mobile first. It ties directly to the transactions and the visits that you take to Starbucks, and I know I'm a loyal customer of theirs as well. Another example, if you slide to the next page, Amazon. We wouldn't have a good conversation about retail if we didn't bring them up. Certainly the Prime membership is probably one of the strongest loyalty programs out there today, and it's because consumers not only love the brand, but they're delivering real value in exchange for the patronage. And as long as we're going to talk about Amazon, just a couple of points is when we're talking about the retail space, it is not, retail is obviously not dead. People who shop on Amazon, we found, shop everywhere. And so what's interesting is that those that shop on Amazon are actually twice as valuable as a customer as those who don't. So if we scroll forward there, spend more. What's interesting as well is it's, as we think about how to engage customers and perhaps combat the Amazon effect, it's really important to look at how all shoppers participate. What are their patterns of behavior? All shoppers typically go to the mall, they'll look at Amazon, they'll look at retail websites, they research products online, they check their email. Online shoppers, slightly different in terms of what their journey is. They may look at Amazon first, they may then go to the retail website, do some research, look for discounts. Prime members, slightly different. They look on Amazon obviously first, then they might go to a store, look at the retail website, research products, read reviews. And retail shoppers differ a little bit. They go to the store first and maybe check their email. So what's important about this is to understand what type of members you've got in your program and how they're going to be engaging with your brand in order to make sure your communication strategies line up with their path to purchase. So lastly, before I hand it over to Caroline, really would just emphasize that the brick and mortar experience is really critical, particularly in retail, that consumers still crave that experience. 80% of all clothing and shoe purchases are made in brick and mortar stores. 25% larger baskets from shopping journeys concluded in an online purchase, and 64% larger basket size when someone first visits a physical store and then purchases from that retailer online. So just as we continue to work with our brand partners, emphasizing that their physical footprint can be a real asset to leverage, particularly as you think about how to engage that consumer emotionally. So with that, I'll hand it off to Caroline to talk about some of the global trends.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to join the call, and wanted to maybe broaden the perspective a little bit. I know a lot of the folks on the phone are very focused on North America, but it's sometimes helpful to sort of think global and act local. And while we have a very active loyalty market in North America, there's some great lessons to be learned by looking sort of across the globe. And thinking whether there are future-facing technologies or innovations that we could be adopting more quickly in the development of our own loyalty programs. And in terms of LoyaltyOne and the global solutions consulting practice that we run, we operate in 51 countries. We have 26 offices around the world, so we do see a lot of different programs. And one thing's for sure, loyalty is on the rise in terms of how it's growing. We're seeing the emergence of exponential technologies like AR, VR, machine learning, blockchain are really changing the loyalty landscape. Probably more in Asia, I'd say today than North America, but it's coming soon, I would say. They're also enabling customer control and peer-to-peer value creation in a much bigger way, which really ties very nicely back to what Shannon and Tad were talking about in terms of emotional loyalty. The power of being able to participate with a peer group or with a friend group is very strong and really ties nicely to emotional loyalty. But it also shifts loyalty mechanics in terms of who is driving the control. Maybe we can go back a slide. Sorry, I'd be going a little faster than I am. And we're seeing new players coming into the market like IoTs, government, insurance, healthcare providers. That's certainly contributing to the rise of loyalty. And multi-motivators. So more and more loyalty programs are expanding from points to an integration of points and discounts, digital tokens, even cryptocurrencies that are transferable and tradable and redeemable across brands. And so when we talk about a loyalty program, we no longer would think of it as a points program, but really think of it as offering a portfolio of incentives to a portfolio of different customer segments. And the market itself is growing. So if we look at, also back a slide if you can, if we look at the top, we looked at large investment firms and their projection, and basically what they are saying is that the loyalty market is going to grow by 3 times over the next 5 years, so by 2022. And they're expecting sort of a 25% CAGR in terms of that market. So what we're seeing around the world are lots of investments being made in new sectors, but certainly across the traditional sectors. So now you can flip to the next slide, and we can just talk about who are the big players. So in 2017, we did a colloquy study, and we determined that there are about 1.6 billion North American memberships. And those were most heavily in grocery. So of all the people that we surveyed, most 61% of them were participating in some sort of a grocery program. 46% in credit card, and then the numbers go down to things like pharma and fuel and airline. But as I said, we are seeing new entrants into the market. Certainly insurance companies are now participating, governments are participating, and we expect to see those numbers go up even further. So then moving forward and talking about what are some of the things that are driving new players. I think IoT and direct to consumer are probably the two most interesting ones. So we're working, for instance, with an interesting company based in Europe, where they're incentivizing people to drive at the speed limit, or to turn off their lights, or to use less water. And we're seeing a lot of interest from brands, specifically CPGs, who want to establish a direct-to-consumer relationship. And that doesn't mean that's exclusive of their retail distribution relationships, but they really want to get a handle. They want to use a loyalty program to get a handle on their customers, their customer segments, and customer insights. On the customer control front, we'll talk more about that, but certainly privacy is enabling a whole other view of how customers are going to participate in loyalty programs. And it goes beyond just having good governance around consent and transparency, but it's moving to some very interesting territories of data portability, where loyalty programs are now going to have to enable, certainly GDPR is enabling that loyalty programs will have to enable your data to be moved from one retailer to the other at the request of a customer. And very few programs are necessarily set up for that type of operation. Rewards are changing. We talked about cryptocurrencies. I don't think it will be too long before we'll see much more active reward deployment in Ethereum and Bitcoin, and of course exponential technologies that are emerging every day, not just on blockchain platforms, but things like facial recognition, which is now well adopted in Asia, certainly in China. Now if you go to KFC or you go to Starbucks or you leave your grocery store, and Alibaba is now investing in, I think, 2 or 3 grocery stores. All you need to do, your payment is already recognized, and all you need to do is wave your hand or make some sort of signal in order to pay and go. So if we think about some of the other big macro trends that we're seeing, moving to the next slide, I'd say one of the things that's probably most interesting to us as loyalty operators is that loyalty programs are taking shape as marketplaces. And if you think about TripAdvisor or Airbnb or even Amazon for that matter, they didn't start as huge platforms that brought buyers and sellers together, but in fact, that's what they've evolved into. And as a result, they're able to get huge customer engagement, as we know. And there are a number of loyalty programs who see this as the future of what they are building. They see it as an opportunity through an earn or opportunity with points and the ability to redeem across multiple partners to be able to enable more interactions with more partners who might offer earn opportunities or redemption opportunities to loyalty members beyond what the brand itself can offer. And we're seeing a high level of investment there in trying to drive programs that get deep penetration of a brand's customer base. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about blockchain. Blockchain is obviously very much on the horizon, and while it's, I'd say, an emerging capability in North America, it is becoming quite established in a number of other parts in the world. And it's probably useful to take a moment and just think about what problem blockchain might be solving, because blockchain is not a panacea to solve a bunch of loyalty operational problems, but there are 2 areas that we've identified where it can really bring new value. One is, I think, in the management of the multiple transactions of both earn transactions and redemption transactions, obviously there are operational systems that are needed to be able to manage the accounting of those, especially when a loyalty program has more than one earn partner or more than one burn partner. And distributed ledger technology, which is now evolving into things like Hyperledger, is a good base case for managing those transactions. The other area where we're seeing growth in terms of blockchain is a great deal of interest in cryptocurrencies for redemption. We haven't seen many programs, and I would say we're still very nervous about it as a direct redemption opportunity, just because of the volatility of the value of some of the cryptocurrencies. It would be very hard to manage the accounting, but we are seeing quite an interest in the ability to earn a point, and then once you could redeem for points that are then convertible. And so we're seeing a great deal of interest in conversion of points into cryptocurrencies. And loyalty platforms are enabling that conversion as part of their redemption offering to their customers. Then moving forward and talking just a little bit more about the customer. And the customer is most definitely going to be in control, and that's upon us, partly because of privacy and GDPR. But I think also because customers are becoming more aware of the value that comes with participating in a loyalty program. And it's not just best customers, it's all customers. So where do we see that going? Beyond GDPR and privacy and control, we see customers participating in wanting to share their points, exchange their points, and maybe even monetizing the value of their points and the data associated with their loyalty program. And as a result, we see there's a place for loyalty programs to play as being intermediaries, perhaps between retail brands and loyalty programs, to be able to help customers get value from their data. I think we are all believers that customers already get value from their data through personalization. So when a loyalty program does a good job of taking the data and delivering customized offers or customized experiences, as Tad talked about, that's absolutely the first step. But it may become more functional than that over time, where customers expect to loan out their data or offer their data for sale in return for greater value, either from the loyalty program or from the retailer directly. So if we then move forward a little bit and say, what are some of the best practice lessons that we have seen across the globe as we work with loyalty programs? And I think it's a useful place for us to wrap up, because we started by talking about the foundations of loyalty. And this is really about the foundations, perhaps, of loyalty programs. So what are some of the foundational learnings that we have for loyalty operators, perhaps to do a better job of engaging their customers and driving the activation levels that really make deliver the financial performance that operators are looking for? So let me start in a simple place, which is segment management. And to make the most simplistic segmentation, I would say that almost every loyalty program would have 3 tiers. It would have best customers, and those would be ones who are giving most of their share of wallet, and they're looking for recognition, they're looking for status, they're looking for some sort of tier value and experiences that are differentiated from the average customer. Then there's a group of customers, I would say, who shop with very functional behaviors, and they are interested in price and promotion, but we can certainly turn them around with more personalized rewards and more personalized experiences. And certainly there's an opportunity there to do a whole lot of promotion to engage them and show them the value of their points. And then the last group is what I might call occasionals. And those are customers who are, quite honestly, non-loyalists. and very focused on mass offers and promotion. And for each of those segments, loyalty operators really need to have a strategy. And so it's really the next step of personalization is not just personalizing communications, but also personalizing, thus the value proposition for each one of those tiers in your loyalty program. The next, if we can move to the next slide, I think that the next point worth mentioning is that as we run our loyalty operations, and whether it's a loyalty strategy or a loyalty program, we often work with clients to really hold themselves accountable to a loyalty ROI. And where we work with programs is to design effective member activation. So programs will spend a lot of time enrolling customers, but may not be able to get the active levels that they need in order to really drive financial performance. So good programs are attracting new customers, they're lifting spend, they have high active rates, they're driving a lot of promotional offers, so a lot of bonusing, often that is funded by vendors, and they're able to demonstrate broad brand appeal and high retention, so reduced churn of their customer base overall. And if these metrics are in alignment, you can really demonstrate strong financial performance and continued investment from your company. And that doesn't fundamentally change whether your program is on blockchain or whether you're using AI or any other type of advanced technology. Ultimately, it has to answer to these performance measures. And finally, I think a very important thing to remember is that operators need to manage a member life cycle. And we know that from almost every program has a very similar trajectory for the member. It starts with enrollment. We get them to make a first transaction. Then the customer becomes active. Let's say they develop a loyalty habit. And then their collection starts to increase. More bonus offers, which means that their accumulation of rewards is higher. Certainly where we can sign them up with a credit card, those are often the most engaged customers. And one of the most important things that we need to do as we move our members through the life cycle is to help them set a goal. And we've seen demonstrated, again, in programs, doesn't matter east to west, where we can get a member to set a goal, we see a significant increase in their spending behavior in advance of rewarding, of redeeming, and then a continued increase in their spend after they've redeemed a reward. So we know the power of a reward to drive an increase in spend both before the redemption and after. And that pattern is replicated in almost every program that we see around the world. And with that, I will hand it back to Bill. I'm assuming you're gonna questions from here. Thank you.
Absolutely. That was brilliant, Caroline. Really brilliant. Nice to have the insight from that global perspective as well. Well, we knew as soon as you mentioned blockchain, there'd be a question about it. So the first one, since you've got the mic, so to speak, is question about there have been a number of apps or loyalty providers or just technology providers sort of talking the loyalty game that have come into the market. And the question is, how much sense of urgency would you recommend that people adopt at this point in time? Is this still a study and contemplate, understand type of market? Is it time to invest? How do you view that right now?
So you're certainly right that there are a lot of new entrants into the market, and some of them have some very interesting solutions. And we've seen pilots turn into rollouts in a number of different markets. What I will say is we haven't seen any major loyalty operator adopt it yet in a significant way. So we're waiting to see scale. But I don't think it's that far away. And we are seeing certainly some of the very big brands, including, American Express, start to pick up on those capabilities and look at ways to integrate them into their present loyalty operations. So I would say for DLT, it's probably distributed ledger technology, excuse me. It's probably much more near term, and we are beginning to see the opportunities for cryptocurrency conversion. I think it's a little farther out. And for all the folks on the phone, I might say, if you're interested in blockchain, we've just issued, I think it was just last week on our website, loyalty.com, we've just issued a major report on blockchain. And it goes a little deeper in terms of who the operators are, but also what we're seeing in terms of those technologies. So that might be a great way to educate yourself as a first step.
Perfect. That's great. Thanks, Caroline. There's a question in here as well. I think this might be a good one for Tad. Beyond payments, we're talking about facial recognition now. Beyond payments, what are the other ways that you're seeing facial recognition or facial description in retail with working either with customers or even from an employee standpoint? How much adoption are you seeing of that in retail?
Well, I think it's still early days. The one example that we've heard of is that I think it's in the fast food industry, using facial recognition really as just a way to identify the consumer from a loyalty membership perspective so that you can personalize that engagement. So not so much for the employee, but if you're able to recognize a customer by their face or other biometrics, you'd be able to tie that person back to their profile and understand their likes, dislikes, purchase behavior, et cetera, and then customize that engagement without them actually having to present a membership card as an example.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and somebody mentioned in our comment stream, by the way, that in the airline industry, the Clear product, so it's an alternative to a TSA, standing in a TSA line, or having a global entry, in your case, the Nexus, using facial and thumbprint identification for check-in. So there are uses of it in industry. I think one of the other things I'd be interested to know is, anecdotally, what are you hearing from your clients? Are they comfortable adopting these technologies and think that customers will be as well comfortable, or is there still some reticence to put too much technology in front of the average consumer?
Well, this is Tad. I can certainly say that I think government in many ways is leading the charge here. I think as consumers become more comfortable with biometrics as a form of payment or identity management, that familiarity will cascade into marketing programs. And so I think in many ways, once you're trusting the government, trusting the technology, to do identity management, it'll become more prevalent in the marketing circles.
Great, thanks. And one for Shannon. This goes back to the very beginning of the material, and it wasn't lost on me, nor was it on some of our participants here, that fragile equates to scary somewhat. And you had a note on one of your slides, Shannon, that said that 1 in 3 of these respondents said that nothing could be done once they had a poor experience. Nothing could be done to bring them back. The question is, loyalty always seemed to be a backroom operation, if you will. And now we're talking about customer experience. We're also talking about a generation of people that are much more maybe sensitive, maybe demanding of a good experience. Is loyalty evolving into something that's very success dependent on that frontline execution? And what do we do about that as providers, as people that are working with brands?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And one of the things that I think we've all looked for a while is, what's the silver bullet that allows us to really serve this new generation of customers and create loyalty? And I think that the truth is, there's just not a silver bullet with the level of data and the ability to really do what I call more precision personalization, not just a name and a subject line, so to speak. Customers just have different level of expectation of how you're going to serve them. And when you think about the negative interaction that you could have by using data in the wrong way, right? Ensuring you don't get to the creepy factor online, ensuring that you're giving recommendations that actually makes sense to them. You think about how a good example for me of someone who's doing it well in the retail space, but you think about Netflix and the investment they've made in individual profiles, viewers, down to customizing your profile picture, your recommendations, following you from device to device. They're engendering that loyalty in a very different way. Even when you look at someone as big as Amazon, I actually think Amazon could make significant improvements if you would take Prime and do the same thing Netflix did and make profiles, right? So when I'm on Amazon, stop showing me HDMI ports. I didn't buy those, you know, somebody else in my house did. And so for brands, it's like, how do you translate that into what you're doing from a loyalty perspective? Leverage the data you have for how you're interacting with consumers, how you're targeting them online, what you're messaging them in emails, but also bringing that into the in-store experience by hitting those fundamentals first and foremost in every interaction. Make sure your care centers or how you're answering, you know, customer calls are connected, bringing that seamless interaction so that whenever they experience your brand, that they are, you know, recognized for the behaviors that they've already exhibited with you, what they've purchased, what they've done. But if you can hit on those basics, especially on the front lines, I think that's what customers are expecting. They just basically want you to, you know, do what you say you're going to do. And it's very interesting to watch just kind of this evolution in the consumer's journey.
Right. That's excellent. Well, I'd like to thank each and every one of you. Caroline, thanks so much. Tad, Shannon, this is a great opportunity to get some people that have deep experience in this customer loyalty business and have the opportunity to kind of get inside their heads, share some insights, and be able to look forward a little bit towards what we can all put to use in our business to do a little bit better job with our customer base. So I've learned a lot today. I appreciate the time and investment that you've all made, and would invite everybody in the audience. Again, we've gathered a couple of questions that we'll catalog and we'll provide some answers back. But if you have anything afterwards, please send an email to contact@thewisemarketer.com and we will answer your questions. We'll circulate it to our panelists as needed. And we appreciate your attendance here today and look forward to seeing you all soon here back at The Wise Marketer. Have a great day.